First item is, are there any disclosures of interest? Hearing none, approval of the previous board meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded, we approve the previous board meeting minutes. Any further questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Review agenda.
Chair, there is one addition. There's one additional court-appointed attorney contracts for 2025 to 2027, and that's with Gorman.
Number 4 on consent agenda.
Consent agenda, item 4.
And then I would like to have a discussion about the contract we approved last month with snowmobile associations. There's been a kind of a snafu with that. I'd like to bring that up, and we can do that under Public Works. Any other additions? And maybe we just met with, Susan and I just met with the school districts on the SRO contract, and we want to bring you up to speed on that and have maybe a little discussion, no decision-making right today, and put it on the agenda for the next meeting. But wanted to bring you up to date on that.
You can do that under committee updates.
Okay?
I think the other committee update will be regarding the meeting regarding the LEC yesterday, so.
Okay, we'll make sure under committee reports we do both of those. All right, anything else? If not, is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Moved and second to approve the agenda as amended. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda. There are 5 items now. And I want to make one comment. If you read the language about the renewal of the land leases, the person who leases it pays the property tax. So while the lease may look low, you have to also tack on property tax on top of that because they're responsible for that. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I just want to make one comment. The resolution to support federal reimbursement of vests for all first responders, we had gotten a letter from Rice County asking if we do that, and I think it's a good thing to do, and I'm pleased that it's on the consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Same, motion carries. Finance and taxpayers, City of Zumbrota TIF proposal.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Morning.
So the Finance Department received a notice of the proposed tax increment financing district number 1-20 from the City of Zumbrota on February 14th, 2025. As required by law, staff distributed the information to the County Board on February 14th, 2025 via email and has placed it on the March 4th County Board agenda should the Board wish to submit written comments. The Board is not being asked to approve the project that is solely at the discretion of the Zumbrota City Council. As outlined in the notification, the City of Zumbrota is proposing a 26-year redevelopment TIF district that encompasses 3 parcels. The purpose of the TIF is to facilitate the development of 38 units of workforce rental housing. Note, one of the parcels is already owned by the City of Zumbrota and is currently exempt from property taxes. At least 50% of the buildings in the district have been found to be structurally substandard. The city has indicated in writing that it would be necessary to provide assistance to the project for certain district costs. The city intends to utilize tax increment financing to assist the developer on a pay-as-you-go basis. The tax increment will only be used to reimburse the developer for eligible costs. The county taxes collected on these 3 parcels for pay year 2024 was about $2,200. Which the county will continue to collect under the TIF law. The proposed TIF is expected to generate a total of over $240,000 annually from the 3 major taxing jurisdictions, or just shy of $83,000 for the county alone. More detailed information can be found in the attached analysis that has been completed by Ellers. Please find a copy of the notification letter, the TIF plan analysis, photos of the properties, and the tax statements for the parcels. The city has scheduled a public hearing on Thursday, March 20th, 2025 at approximately 6 p.m. to receive public comment on the establishment of the proposed TIF district. If the county wishes, they can submit written comments by no later than 30 days of receiving written notice on the proposed district. So staff does not see any issues with the TIF district. However, the board should inform staff if they have any significant comments you would like to be relayed to the city of Zumbrota regarding the use of their proposed TIF district. So at this point, there's no official action to be taken, but if you have any information or questions that you'd like to have passed along to them, I can certainly do that.
Anything? It's really a city decision as far as whether they do that or not.
That's correct.
All we'd be doing is commenting. Seeing none, we'll move on to potential community energy transmission grant.
Yes, this next one here, the Department of Employment and Economic Development, through its Office of Energy Transition, is seeking applications from qualified responders to assist eligible communities to address economic dislocation and social impact associated with the closing of a local electric generating plant. So eligible applicants include counties in which an electric generating plant owned by a public utility that is powered by nuclear energy that is currently operating and whose current operating license expires within 15 years of July 1st, 2023. Xcel Energy's Prairie Island Nuclear Power Plant currently has licenses to operate through 2033 and 2034, which falls within that eligibility period. Eligible projects include planning for or addressing the economic and social impacts of the eventual closure of a power plant. There are a wide variety of potential uses of the CET grant funds, but all projects must be designed to increase the eligible community's property tax base, develop alternative economic development strategies to attract new employers to the eligible community, and assist workers at the plant find new employment, including worker retraining and developing small business startup skills. So Goodhue County previously ran a program in which building permit fees for new housing units were reimbursed, thereby incentivizing the construction of additional housing throughout the county. This program ran for just over 4 years and assisted with the creation of 333 single-family dwelling housing units and 256 multi-unit housing units. The average reimbursement cost for the single-family housing unit was just over $2,000. For those multi-unit housing units, it was just over $600. Staff are proposing to apply for the CET grant for the remaining available balance of $499,750. The purpose would be to restart and expand that permit reimbursement program. Not only would we restart the program, we would also enhance it to include the reimbursement for all housing construction, not just limited to those new ones only, as well as to include the reimbursement related to commercial, industrial buildings, as well as sewer access charges and water access charges, fees associated with those structures. Staff feel the program would qualify for the grant as new commercial, industrial, and residential buildings increase the county's tax base. The program would incentivize the expansion of current businesses as well as potentially bring in new companies to the area. And the economic development related to new or expanded businesses could create additional jobs. So at this time, staff are looking for direction of whether or not we have the support of the board to proceed with applying or going through all the paperwork required to start this grant program.
Questions?
Well, I have a couple questions. First, thanks for doing this, and I think applying for it is a great idea. I wondered if we had evidence to suggest that when we did it before, it actually increased the number of people building houses, or if it didn't, so I wondered that. And then I wondered if we had any information on other uses that other places had besides the building permit reimbursement. And it's not that I have anything in mind, but those are the two things that I wondered. One, did it work? And two, what are the other choices for this money?
Yeah, I would say for, I can't give you 100% evidence that it increased. However, I would say that during this time period, there was more apartment buildings put up than, I don't know what the statistic would be, but there were several apartment buildings that were put up utilizing this program that I don't know if those would have been constructed. Going back the past, I don't know, 10, 15 years, I don't think there's been that many in this short of an amount of time. Like I said, I don't have any,
I understand that you aren't sure that it's sort of your,
certainly,
appears that way to you. Yeah.
I would think so, yes. As far as other uses that other entities have applied for the use of the grants, I don't have that information as well. I could reach out to DEED and see if they would share that information.
I was just curious. One of the things that Three Rivers does that I think is very nice is they take older buildings and turn them into daycares where they rent out the space. And I think that could really help with economic development because I think it's hard for families to move in if there isn't a reliable, decent daycare. And it just came to my mind as we were talking, and I didn't know if something like that would be a possible use or not.
I'll answer your last question first. Yes, that would qualify. It would be a commercial, basically a commercial permit that would be an expansion of tax base.
So I'm not sure, that, I mean, obviously, we aren't going to commit to that in a meeting like this, but if you include more possibilities on the grant, doesn't that give you more flexibility for what you actually do with the grant money?
Right, but that's something that would already qualify under.
Oh, I see.
under
We
the
don't have to
description.
write it in that we would
No.
be using it for that.
No, that fits under the commercial industrial.
Okay.
Yep.
That's what I didn't know.
To go to the other couple questions that you had, I mean, Lucas answered most of the, did we see any pure evidence that somebody built just because of that program? No, we didn't. But I can tell you that, it produced like 582 permits in about a 4-year period.
Sure.
And typically for us to get 582 building permits, it's closer to a 10-year period, not a 4-year period. So did that incentivize them to build earlier? I don't know.
I
but-
suppose you'd have to compare it to the counties, other counties that didn't do that, where did their numbers go up in that same period?
Yeah.
I'm not asking you to
Or-
do it, I'm just
No,
saying that.
or we can just be happy that we.
Yeah,
did.
yeah, yeah.
Because
And-
typically we get, 50 building permits a year
Yeah.
before this period of time, and we got 582
Yeah, that's great.
in that period of
And
time. So
I think it's
that's-
great to apply myself, so that would be
So
my,
the other part of your question is that one of the other entities that has received a grant fund out of this Energy Transitions Committee is the City of Red Wing, and they're currently working on it. They got a couple $100,000 on it. I don't know the full extent of it. I'm supposed to get an update on it tomorrow morning at 9:30. But I do know theirs is largely planning on trying to diversify the tax base. Whereas this one, it's a little different, where we know that one way we for sure can expand the tax base is this.
yes, I
And
understand
obviously, 582 units before, that was a lot of new tax base.
How many dollars did we put into that? Do you remember?
It was, I think it was pushing $1 million, but Lucas probably has the exact number.
I believe it was about, I think it was 850,000 total that went into it.
Right. Okay. Go ahead.
Do we have the ability to promote this grant availability to others to truly expand this in the commercial way?
You mean other cities or other?
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea. I was just wondering whether or not we really have do we have the ability to truly promote it in a variety of different ways to ideally bring in some new commercial businesses? Robust promotion, I guess, is what I'm thinking of.
I would imagine if we are approved for the grant, then we certainly would advertise that we were awarded the grant and get it out in the community. I'm assuming we would put out press releases, put it out in the newspapers, do whatever we could to, and, fortunately, we have Nick now that
We do.
is good at
We
that
do.
kind of thing.
So hang on, I just forgot my question. All right, it'll come back around.
Well, you're looking at $500,000 basically.
Oh, that was my question, thank you. You're so good. Can part of the grant cover the cost of actually trying to spend some money on promotion to, or aren't we that far into the grant to even know what would be covered?
Well, it says what eligible projects are in the grant under this, like, maybe bottom of the first page. Land use studies, economic planning, research planning, and implementing activities, capital costs of public infrastructure necessary for economic development, the impact studies and other planning activities enabling communities to become shovel-ready and support the transition of power plants to other economic activities, minimize the negative impacts of the power plant going away. I mean, that's a, and that, not limited to that, but that's a pretty broad brush. The question I have is if you write into the grant that you're going to use it for A, B, and C, now does that tie you to use it for A, B, and C? Or can you use it for any of those kinds of activities? And I don't know.
That was really my question, too, why I brought up that.
When we would go through the writing of the grant, we would probably write it such that, to support the activities going around that, because there will be a big promotional aspect that we'll have to do with our cities as well, because that's where most of the economic development happens. But I'll just tell you that if they're courting some business that's thinking about moving locations and beyond the building permit, if they can offer the whack and sack, because hardly anybody can waives the whack and sack fees. I mean, if they can waive all three of those, that's a big deal.
Correct. From the way that's worded, it doesn't look like you can give direct payments to a business to come here, but you can incentivize them through permit fees and, as you said, whack and sack fees, those kinds of things that affect your infrastructure. It's kind of the way I read that. Does the board want the county to apply?
Yes.
Definitely.
Then
I support it.
then move a motion to direct staff to apply.
I'll make a motion to
Objection,
apply.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries.
Thank you.
And GFOA Certificate of Achievement.
Yes, the last item that I have here today is that we are proud to announce that the GFOA has awarded the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting to Goodhue County for the annual comprehensive financial report or audit report for the fiscal year ended December 31st, 2023. This was the 5th consecutive year that Goodhue County has received this award. And I also wanted to point out that there's only 17 counties in the state that actually receive this award. This award is the highest form of recognition in governmental accounting and financial reporting, and its attainment represents a significant accomplishment by a government and its management. The report has been judged by an impartial panel to meet the high standards of the program, which includes demonstrating a constructive spirit of full disclosure, to clearly communicate its financial story and motivate potential users and user groups to read the report. I'd like to congratulate and thank both Administrator Arneson and the Goodhue County Board for the continued support, as this attainment represents a significant accomplishment by a government and its management. This achievement would not have been possible without the tireless efforts of our talented staff, to include the entire countywide finance team, the payroll team, and the department heads for adhering to the strict accounting and policy standards that put Goodhue County in this elite group.
Very impressive. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Congratulations and thank you.
It's really, truly, as you said, the staff that really does this. They put in a lot of stuff to keep track of everything. So I really appreciate the work they do, and it's great that you get recognized for that.
Yep, thank you. It truly is a countywide effort. There's the finance department staff, the HHS finance staff, HR with payroll, each of the departments. It's truly an organizational goal here, so thank you.
Excellent. All right. Public Works.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Today I have a quick item for you to consider scheduling a public hearing to discuss a variance request for access. The background on this item stems from a request from David and Vanessa Jandro. They submitted an application for an access permit at their residence. And currently, they have one existing access. They're requesting a second access for the purpose of maintenance on their parcel and constructing a shed. The original permit was denied based on spacing requirements that are outlined in our access policy. As I mentioned, the parcel currently has a driveway that provides reasonable and convenient access. The policy outlines a process whereby landowners can apply for a variance. The Jandros have chosen to go through that variance process. They have submitted an application for that variance process, which was submitted February 20th, and a public hearing was requested by them, which requires the board to discuss and establish if they so choose. So that's where we're at this morning. Are there any questions?
I looked up the parcel. Actually, I know exactly where it is and know what it looks like down there. There's a lot of driveways in a very short period, or short space there.
Yep.
Are they trying to do a driveway to the north of their current driveway, to the south of their current driveway?
To the north.
To the north?
To the north, yep. Yep, and, the question of spacing has come up already, and there are several driveways that also do not meet the access policy's requirements. Unfortunately, I'm not, at this moment in time, 100% positive if the county had permitted those accesses or not. Landowners routinely install driveways without permits, and we can't always keep up to date on exactly all of the accesses that are permitted or not. Some of them may have been installed prior to our access policy actually existing, but the fact that this one was applied for and does not meet our access policy, regardless of the fact that the other accesses also do not meet the policy, does not permit me to allow this access to be permitted.
Questions?
Comment is this, so this has to go through the Board of Adjustments for the variance? Or we're going to come right to the board, county board, if we schedule a public hearing, so.
Yeah, the public hearing will be held, preferably at the first meeting in April. I think that's what we're shooting for.
I guess it's hard to say without knowing or seeing any pictures or what their area is to make that assessment. I guess we can do that at the variance process, but what's your recommendation? I mean, they can obviously kind of ask, but is this a safety issue? Is there line of sight problems? Is there?
It's always a safety matter, and that's why the spacing requirements exist in the policy. So it was denied based on that.
There's not a line of sight issue.
Well, the policy exists and the spacing requirements exist for the people that are on County Road 14 and any of our other roads. It's not the line of sight for the person leaving their driveway per se. While we try to site those driveways to meet the best line of sight for those individuals, the spacing requirements are purely for the motorists on County Road 14 and the rest of our system.
Spacing, meaning,
The stopping sight distance requirement.
okay? For
So,
traffic.
in this area of County Road 14, the speed limit's 55.
Yep,
So the stopping sight distance, the preferred The preferred site distance would be 725 feet with a minimum, don't quote me exactly, I don't have the policy in front of me, I'm just going off of recollection. 725 feet is the preferred distance with a minimum of, I believe it was 550 or 525. So we can shorten that distance a couple hundred feet. But in this case, the spacing was substantially less.
Of a line of sight, you're saying that they cannot see this driveway based on the traffic coming from 14, will not be able to see cars pulling out of that driveway.
It's not the line of sight, it's the stopping sight distance.
Okay, either way, line of sight, stopping sight distance. So
It-
the driveway is approached on a hill or coming over a hill or a curve where there's stopping distance that they can see.
Again, it's the stopping distance, so it's the vehicle's speed and how quickly the person can react and stop the vehicle before hitting someone that's coming out of that driveway.
Can I just, I don't mean to stop this, but a variance can be granted because there's a particular issue with the property that causes the ability to use it in a certain way, such as if this particular site had a creek that ran between here and the rest of their parcel, then it would be realistic that they should get access to the other part of their parcel. In this case, there is nothing that inhibits them from coming from their current driveway, turning left, going around the garage, and getting to the site that they want to get to. There's nothing that inhibits it. You cannot give a variance just because you want to give a variance. A variance has very specific reasons why you can give it. And one of them is, the most used one is, I can't use all my property because of this impediment that keeps me from getting there. There's nothing in this that does that. So if you're asking for a variance because of the property, what's the hardship? What's the cause of asking for the variance? Convenience isn't an answer. It has to have a definite issue with that particular property. So you have to understand what a variance is giving, not whether you just want to give it.
Right.
It has to have a cause from the property. And, you know, Todd, sitting on Planning Commission, hears all these kinds of things that it's not just whether it meets some traffic deal. It also, the property has to be the reason. And there's no reason that I can see on this property that inhibits them from going anywhere on that property.
I believe, based on the information that's been submitted by the Jandros, there's a septic system that's installed that would prohibit them from going around their existing garage to the north. The layout, and we'll cover all this in the public hearing. There'll be more information.
I guess my concern would be is if you don't have a specific reason, like Brad's saying, is we might get a lot of these variances.
That's correct.
And then the property just to the north of it, their driveway is right next to the line. So there's like, in 100 feet, you're going to have 3 driveways.
Yep.
And that's too close. I think there's other
Been
options.
nice to add it to the report. So, I guess that's a question I had. If you're asking us to discuss, actually, if there's no real reason other than hearing the variance, do we need to grant a public hearing, no matter what? Or if the information that you're providing for us, and if we had pictures to see it, I don't have a picture to see this, I mean, whatever it is, do we need to take the time to schedule a public hearing? Is that just standard practice? We should, then let's schedule a public hearing and go on, and we'll get the pictures and get all the information.
The
Kind of-
board reserves the right to not grant the public hearing, but given the policy lays out the possibility after denial for public hearing process, we recommended that you take that into consideration and follow the due process.
Sort of the right to be heard.
Let's do it then.
Yeah.
Simple enough.
And obviously, granting the public hearing doesn't mean you're granting the variance. It just means you're going to allow them to present their case to the board, and you can make a decision. I think it's probably helpful to them to hear the discussion today, so they know where the board is kind of, what they're thinking about and what information is important to that decision-making process. But obviously, setting the public hearing doesn't mean you're granting the variance at this point.
I'll make a motion to hold a public hearing on April 1st for this matter.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? And that will be during a regular board meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Administration.
Thank you, Chair.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt?
Yeah,
ahead.
sure.
Did you change the agenda to include your snowmobile discussion under Public Works?
Yes, I did. You're right. Let's have that discussion. So, I got notified by and as I'm sure most of the rest of the staff did, by the Snowmobile Association, that by the way we wrote our agreement with the Snowmobile Association, it said that they'd have $1.5 million liability insurance. Their current policies are $1 million of insurance. They, to add that extra $500,000 costs about $700 to $800 per club. So $4,500 to $4,800, somewhere up in there. And their ask was, can we lower it down to their rate, their $1 million? And Steve had talked when we started this that the $1.5 million is the limit that the state, or that we can be sued. Is that kind of accurate?
Correct. That's the 1.5 million is the maximum per incident. It could be multiple claims. 1 million is the per claim liability limit for counties, but the per incident claim, if there's multiple claims involved, is 1.5.
So I wanted to raise the question, no, and only for this season, to lower it to the $1 million, sign the agreements, get the funding to the clubs, knowing full well we're at early March, probably 3 weeks, well, they have to close the trails on March 31st, so three and a half weeks of possibility of snowmobiling, which is probably not going to happen. Do we just lower it for this year, work with the state, Steve's still working with the state on this and DNR, and try to get something changed and then come back next year? And if we can't, we're going to ask for the $1.5 million.
Does their policy go a calendar year, or does it go, so are they operating on a 2025 policy that will also be next November, December?
I don't have an answer for that question. You'd have to ask the clubs that, yeah.
And Brad, you don't know the answer to that question?
Well, it doesn't, I mean, if they had to add the $500,000 this year, just to get the funding,
For 2025, you're talking about?
yeah, for the end of this season, because their funding from DNR comes for the snowmobile season, not for a calendar year. They get funded for November to March, and in 2 payments. Well, to get the payments, we have to sign all these agreements. And it was just a question, is the board willing to, in this year, change that to finish out this year? And then if it doesn't get resolved, we will be back here talking about this next year, and we will anyway, because we'll have to have contracts signed, and we'll have to agree to sign the grant for snowmobile funding anyway. So I think it's just a question. If the board says no, we want to say no liability, well, in essence, talking with Steve this morning, when we talked about that, you cannot assign this to someone else, we're not out of the woods at all on this anyway. And just to compound it, Cannon Valley Trail signed the limited use permits for going under 61 by AP Anderson Park and going under 61 out by the grain elevator. And both of them are covered by MCIT, so basically there's no coverage. So we really need to back that train up and think about that too. So we have a lot of, this whole deal is really confusing to me.
And
It should be DNR
the
taking on
total
this.
cost to the snowmobile company or clubs to get to the 1.5 for this year would be 4,000 something?
4,800, 45 to 4,800. 700 to 800 per club, depending on how many miles, I'd imagine, to some degree.
Sure.
And it's like, they're going to pay it for a season that they didn't have. So it's just a question.
Although if it's the calendar year, it would be for next season too, for the beginning of next
But
season.
we don't have our contract with, or our signatures with the trails aren't for a full year, they're for this season, right?
The contracts are for a snowmobile season.
Right.
Yep,
So it's really only covering the 24-25 season right now.
that's correct.
We will have to come back and do a 25-26.
Yeah, I understand that. And we don't know if their insurance covers that same gap or if it's different than that.
Just a question, if the board's willing to modify that down. And Steve, if you got comments, please bring them forward.
Other than I'd share your frustration with the process. Obviously, it's a policy decision by the board. Again, I hate to say it, I don't want to jinx anything, but, you know, I think the exposure here is pretty limited. We're talking about this one limited use permit, which covers a small section of the total trail system. So I think the exposure is limited, but it is there. So MCIT made it very clear that they will not cover the county in the event that we are held responsible for activity of the state of Minnesota. And that's what that indemnification clause does give us some of that responsibility. The agreement that we drafted with the individual clubs tried to mitigate that with some of the language in there. The clubs will indemnify the county in the event that we are held liable for activities of the state of Minnesota. So hopefully that helps cover some of that and will give us some coverage on that. How that all plays out in the event of a real lawsuit, I don't know. That's part of the mystery of the whole thing. So these are all contractual language in areas that are oftentimes heavily litigated, and so the outcome is definitely not certain in any case.
And of course,
Nothing like this has been tried before. There's no
Well,
case law.
Yeah, I'm not aware of it. but-
we have insurance hoping we never have to use it, but we still have our homeowner's insurance or whatever that might be. Is it possible to split the cost where the county would kick in $2,400 and they would have to pay $2,400, or is that not a use of county funds that is possible?
Well, you're talking about the public purpose, whether or not it's a proper expenditure of public
That's what I'm
funds for this
asking, yeah.
particular purpose. I'd have to think about that a little bit, but at the outset, I would probably say probably not. But,
That we can't do that?
yeah.
He didn't say can't, he said shouldn't. That's what I heard. Shouldn't do that.
Well, and I think that. in
That
the-
came across my mind too. Could the county pick up this tab for this year
Or
or
part of it,
not?
share that's what I wondered, yeah.
That could be part of the negotiations next year, too. I mean, I see very little exposure here. I am fine with going ahead because it is $1 million per incident, and that's what they are covering. You know, so I agree with you that there is very little exposure on this, so I would move this forward that we are okay to sign the document going with the $1 million limit,
Change the document to reflect $1 million.
For this season.
just for this season, remainder of this season.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. All right. Thank you. And we really do probably need to take I know the Cannon Valley Trail signed that LUP. Cannon Valley Trail doesn't own the trail. The LUP might be with the wrong entity. We need to think about that.
Like you guys have nothing else to do, right?
I know the state of Minnesota prefers to hold the LUPs with the organizations that are acting, whether they own the property or not. With the Cannon Valley Trail, Goodhue County owns that section of property. But the Cannon Valley Trail operates, and it's, the LUPs for the Cannon Valley Trail are a little different than the snowmobile trails. And it's to help protect damage that would occur to MnDOT's right-of-way, specifically under those bridges.
Not over the road.
Correct.
But I like your analogy that MnDOT likes to do it with the organization that actually operates the trail, because that means the snowmobile associations should be the ones talking, or DNR, not
agree.
Goodhue County.
I agree.
So, and like I said, Steve told me he's still working on this, trying to figure out how to get around it and figure out how to deal with MnDOT and DNR, because it really should be, I think we all agree it should be in DNR that should be signing these and should be responsible for this, it's not a mode of transportation, it's a mode of recreation. All right, more to come. Thank you. Broadband proposal.
Okay, thank you. Last month, Commissioner Anderson and I were approached by Representative Finstad's office seeking any type of congressionally directed spending, which this year they're calling a community project funding for this particular category that we're talking about today. Subsequently, since then, I believe it was yesterday or maybe Sunday, we received notice from Senator Klobuchar on the Senate side that they will be having the same process. So at the end of this, when I ask for approval to submit, I'm asking for both the Senate and the House side. At any rate, they did ask specifically on one road project that is not a good fit at this time. So we also looked into whether there was any broadband projects that our private providers were interested in. We have a grouping that does work in Goodhue County that we always send out to. We did initially receive one response from Nuvera, and it's a proposal for $4.2 million for 214 subscribers in Zumbrota Township, Goodhue Township, Featherstone Township, and a small portion of Hay Creek Township and Belvedere Township. They also are proposing to provide 100% of the 25% federal, non-federal match that's required, which is $1 million also. After the packet deadline, so this is new online information, we received a second proposal from MediaCom, and that proposal was for a little over $15 million, almost $16 million for fiber to the home. It's 841 locations from basically all the way from the unincorporated areas of Cannon Falls to Lake City. They also agreed to contribute 100% of the non-local or non-federal 25% match, which is about $4 million. It appears that both the proposals meet the federal guidelines. So we are recommending that both of them be submitted. I do believe that from a prioritization standpoint, both the Senate and the House, they usually like the local entity to prioritize them. And I will note that the Nuvera project was part of a previous congressionally directed spending program that we had already approved back in 2021. And I believe we received notice that we got it in 2022. So I think from a priority standpoint, it would probably be appropriate that given our past work with Nuvera, that would probably be your one project and the MediaCom would be your two project. And I do think because there's limited dollars out there that I don't see that we'd get both funded, but maybe we get one funded. So at this time, I guess we'd stand for any questions. Lucas, John, and Nick were all involved in this process.
Questions?
No, but thank you guys for your work on this. It's important to the county.
I do just have a couple of comments so the cost of rock boring that they're talking about, this is from MediaCom, it ends up being $84,000 per fiber route mile, which is an incredible amount of money. The other thing that at least I found, I'd never heard of MediaCom, so I did look them up. And they do have some poor results coming from, that's listed in the 2025 Consumer Reports and also the Better Business Bureau. So while I definitely want broadband throughout the county, but I would concur with what Mr. Arneson has said, that I would like to see us prioritize the one over the other, and the other $15 million is a lot of money. When it doesn't come with a whole bunch of support from past projects, or it comes with a lot of complaints from past projects. I guess I'm very nervous about the idea of doing the same thing that we did with, or not we, but I mean that was done with our RDOF, thank you. Yes.
Which was they tied up areas for broadband.
They did. They couldn't do the projects because they were so big. And now it's a question of, well, where's that money then? Since they can't do the projects the way they had originally said. So that makes me a little bit nervous. However, I think broadband is incredibly important, so I would hope that we move forward.
Any further questions?
I just have a comment. When I start thinking about things that are needed in our county, and broadband is very important, but we're going to drop $19,800 for each one of these households, and we don't even know if they're going to sign up for it. We need housing, we need we need homeless in the wintertime. Well, we need homeless all the time, but I mean, I understand that the directions where things are going, but this is a lot of money, you know.
A lot of money per house.
I know the satellite is getting better. I know there's been struggles with it. I had people sitting in my office saying, we need to get, broadband to my area. She said, well, I have HughesNet and it works, but we want another option. Instead of paying $120, we've heard we can get it for like $75 a month. And for this kind of dollars to be spent for that, I'm struggling with it.
So I think you apply for the grants as the federal government has set them out, and I don't think we get to set what they're allowing grants for.
Yeah.
And we see what the grants are and see if they could be useful to our community. Who knows if these grants will even survive to be there? I have no idea.
I think that congressional directed funding, it's like this one gets this much and this one gets that much, and they have to pick projects that they can fit into that deal. I think that I like our two-pronged approach of talking with the Senate and the representatives, that, and quite frankly, if the federal government has decided to spend the money, it's going somewhere.
That's what I think. It's going somewhere.
Or it's not going to get not spent. It's going to get spent, but if you're not in the, and quite frankly, this happened at the Cannon Chamber when I spoke at the Cannon Falls Chamber. Brad Pinsted's area rep was there, and he came to me as soon as I walked in the door and said, I want you to put in a project for road funding. And right away, I talked with staff, and that project's just not ready to go and not got the backing of MnDOT right now. So it was a no-go. And then staff looked at other options, and this is certainly one of them that we've used, and it has had positive results. And we don't always get to pick who we work with. It's who walks up to the door and is willing to work with us.
Yeah.
That's the other side of that, so. What's your wishes?
I would make a motion to go forward with the applications for both broadband and prioritizing them as Administrator Arneson suggested.
Second.
I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded. We move forward as recommended by staff. Any further discussion? Go ahead.
I'm just gonna second what Todd says. I've said it before. The other times I don't. This doesn't make any sense to spend money. We don't know, and either which way if we say the money, but maybe at some particular point in time, people take a step back and understand that we're $37 trillion in debt. Where do they think this money's coming from? We say it's gonna go somewhere. Could be, but I don't support it. It doesn't make any financial sense, so.
Right? Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose?
No.
3-2. All right. For your information, we had the Goodhue County Sheriff's Report in there, project status report, new and old business, or committee reports.
I do.
Go ahead.
Okay. So this is from the Public Safety Committee at the Association of Minnesota Counties. Kendall Hughes he's with the Lakes Area Restorative Justice Program. He came in and gave a presentation on restorative justice because there are some significant studies that have been done. One was a Michigan study on out-of-home placement and truancy that went down. There is a very high satisfaction rate from victims in the community of 94% with victim satisfaction versus 24% working just within the traditional criminal justice system. There's a Minneapolis study that showed a reduced recidivism. Out of 1,707 youth in the program, only 15% reoffended. And a Rochester study showed that out of 60 cases, only 6 reoffended. That Michigan study, again, also showed that for every dollar invested, there was a $14 return on investment. So he was encouraging the different counties to apply for the $8 million grants that are available to develop a restorative justice program, and Goodhue County has already applied for that. The STS program was talked about a little bit. Originally, it started, there was a 50-50 split with the counties, then it went down to 75% for the counties paying for it, 25% for DOC, and now the 0% for DOC is what's proposed. AMC is, at least the Public Safety Committee strongly suggested letters of support be sent to the Department of Corrections about the county need for something like this, the cost challenge of the STS program, and the liability issues for the counties that we run into if DOC does not continue with this. And the last one I have is that there was a presentation at the Board of Directors meeting by the League of Minnesota Cities. It's a draft report, and it was about recruitment and retention. Most counties need more information to get their jobs publicly out there, need more opportunities for training. And the biggest thing was to have, they suggested having a retention committee. And I did mention that we did have one, and they said that we were far ahead of the curve on doing something like that, whether it might be difficult or not to work through it. But they did strongly suggest that there were some very strict parameters put on so that everybody going into the meeting knew, here's what you can really talk about because you've got some control over, and here are the things that there's no point in bringing them up because we really don't have the ability. So there should be strong parameters. And the final thing was Julie Ring, who's the executive director of Association Minnesota Counties, said that for over 30 years, Minnesota has been known as a person-centered state, and she stated that program change is coming, and that we no longer can sustain the idea of whatever a person needs is what we will try to give them. So she strongly suggested that counties begin to start deciding what to keep and how to transform their systems. Probably it in a nutshell.
Is that based on funding?
Funding, yes. at
Back
both
to-
the state and the federal level, but
Back
most
to
of the
the
state.
top one, and the restorative justice, and we've talked, I've been in many meetings where that's been talked about, and I know it's successful. I understand that. I'm curious, you talked about Rochester was 6 out of 60, which is 10% recidivism or whatever.
Recidivism, yeah.
Yep. What's the norm? If you're not in any of that, what's the average rate? Steve's hitting the button?
I haven't looked at those numbers in a while, but for adults, I know in Minnesota, the recidivism rate is usually around 25 to 30%.
So it's a significant, if those were true of juveniles, that's a significant change.
Correct. Yeah.
And especially when it happens at the juvenile level,
Right.
you hope it carries through to the adult, when they become adults also, so.
Well, when they have considerably less that re-offend. The other thing they really did talk about was that the out-of-home placement went down considerably, and so did truancy. But I know out-of-home placement is a huge, huge expense for counties, so that's a big deal.
All right.
I'll give an update on the LEC. We had a meeting yesterday, and I guess I'd start off with saying it was a very cordial meeting, so that was helpful. We got a chance to meet and chat with the new city administrator, which was also helpful. What came out of that meeting was everyone expressing a desire to work fairly together and to do the best we can for the citizens of Goodhue County, which includes the citizens of Red Wing. We had not completed the study that the city paid for half of and we paid for half of. And so now with the new information for what the city is requesting, we're going to complete that study, and then we'll get back together again after that study is completed. And I think there was a fair amount of discussion between wants and needs, and if everything that the city has in their current proposal is something that they want or feel that they need, we probably don't have the space, but if that's not the case, we probably do. And again, the fact that it was cordial was helpful. The mayor again requested a meeting with the full board, with the full city council. And really, that wasn't discussed a whole lot because we felt like we needed the results of this study before we could figure out how to move forward. That sound fairly accurate?
I think that's a great summary.
Okay.
To say Mr. Dowling is awesome, so.
Yeah, he did a great job. I thought all the county employees did. We commissioners behaved ourselves pretty well, too, so.
I thought, the documents that got shared after the meeting yesterday, really, I've always been looking for something on paper that's concrete, that this is how we've gotten to where we've gotten to, and this is the process, and for all of us collectively, city council, staff, county board, to realize that we've gotten here because of decisions of people who sat on these boards either 20 years ago, 10 years ago, or 2 days ago. They've all been decisions that everybody's been involved in and made, and that's how you get to where you are. And I'm glad that the vision from yesterday sounds like we're looking forward, and we're going to see if what you want fits with what we can offer on our limited amount of property.
Right.
And if it doesn't fit there, the discussion can end. If really the city needs to say, the council needs to say, these are the things we have to have in our sheriff's or police department. These are the things that are wants, but we don't absolutely need. And we need clear direction on that, especially for the people doing the study, to actually reflect what the city is wanting and not willing to compromise.
I believe the architect is going to meet with the chief of police and talk that through. And I don't know if he'll meet with the city council as a group or not, but I know that he's meeting with the chief of police.
I think he's even talking about doing a walkthrough with them, too.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Well, as long as city council is backing all of what their police chief wants,
I don't know that
that's
they are.
different.
Yeah.
Because the city council is the one that makes that final decision, just like we as a county board will make a final decision. And we need to be cognizant, and not, this is not negative, this is just cognizant. Our building is owned by 48,000 residents. And its primary use, we have to meet the needs of our sheriff. We're not going to compromise the needs of our department. We need to work together to make sure that doesn't happen too. So it's all intertwined, but we need to make sure we take care of what we're responsible to
Right.
vote for, just like the city needs to take care of what
And
they're responsible to
We
vote
also
for.
need to consider wants and needs like any,
Absolutely.
we do with any department.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I also want to comment Sheriff Kelly, too, on his willingness to work through this, so thank you.
Go ahead.
They mentioned how long the TSP study would take?
Yes. Stacy had talked to Yvonne, and he said, I think it was around 8 to 10 weeks, and that he thought he could get started on it fairly quickly.
Right. I
And-
also want to thank you for that fact sheet that came out yesterday. That was very well put together, and it really gave a big overview of, yes, how we got where we are now. So thank you.
It gets everybody on the same page. I hope they share that like you did with city council, so everybody on city council sees those documents, because they really do spell out.
And what happened with that in the end, Lucas? You're talking about the one where it listed all the years and the money that was spent?
Well,
and-
the
Be one, too? Yeah.
fact sheet and the history one.
Yeah.
And what the consultant's gonna do.
Right,
I
right.
think all three of those, it's critical that everybody that's making decisions has those in their hands. So I hope the city shares them. Go ahead.
Yeah, we have no control with how they disseminate their information. That, the history sheet is not new. It's updated, but we had distributed that last summer, so that's not new. But at any rate, like I say, I would hope they would, but we can't control that. As far as the question on whether or not there'll be a step in the process for the boards to look at what the wants and needs that were put forward, I think the committee heard that loud and clear, that that's something that's desired. So my guess is when Stacy talks with Vaughn, that would be something that would be incorporated. The example I gave yesterday is that if Marty wants a copper roof, my guess is that when the board sees that, they'll probably say, no, we don't. The probably more applicable example, though, would be if Marty said, hey, I need a regional training center. We'd probably say, hey, Marty, there's one in Rochester, why don't you go use that one? So, anyways.
All right. Anything else on LEC?
Anything else on your end?
Did we at least send that paperwork to the city?
They all received it.
Well, but Lucas, I don't know if they got all of the paperwork that,
The document that I had put together was handed off to one of the staff members, one of the City of Red Wing staff members, and my assumption is they are going to share that widely amongst themselves, so.
Thank you very much.
Right. And then this morning, previously, Susan and staff and I met about the SRO contracts that we want to get signed. And then we kind of talked through some things, and Lucas put together a 3-year contract that spelled out, that it was longer, that it was, there's some changes. Some of the officers have gotten DARE training, so we added that into the contracts for those, and then come up with kind of some rates. And one of the things that came out that Susan and I and staff talked about is just the timing of schools and how they have to levy and when their budget actually hits them and they actually start spending those dollars. And it's a really long process for schools because they're levying dollars for a school year that starts in July, so they have to levy September, December for a school year that starts in July, after the legislative session, with the legislature changing what they have to do in that school year, and then they have to, then they get to that point, then they have to figure out how do we make these dollars meet all these new obligations plus what we currently have. And one of the things that was said in one of our meetings, I think when we approved the last contract, is that we said we'd get it to them sooner. And we didn't really meet that. They had the levy, and we hadn't given them anything to go on. Consequently, we're here. We're way earlier than we were last year, but they've already done their levy, kind of figured out their budgets, and now we're doing this. So one of the things was to leave the SRO flat the first year at the 70,000 that we were, and then start increasing it by CPI after that. And there was discussion before that the board kind of wanted schools to pay 60%. This does not attain that, but this is something that's workable from their side, and it doesn't quite meet the 60% that we were talking about that they pay. But I think that's the discussion.
Yeah,
But
I
we
think that
presented
is.
this to them. This is something they can live with. If we went to the 60%, one of them said that might be a deal breaker.
So I went back and watched both of the cows from last spring and then the meeting. And at the second cow, what the consensus was of the board was that 60-40 split. And then I think, Todd, you ended up meeting with the superintendents, and that didn't seem viable. And so then you came back to the board with that 70,000 number. And then at that meeting, we kind of said, as I looked at it, is okay, we'll do that for 1 year. And then we didn't make a plan about how we would go forward after that. So one suggestion is sticking with that 70,000 for next year and then going up by the CPI. Although I think we know that that the insurance, our expenses are probably going to go up faster than the CPI for the deputies. Another was saying, well, do we want to get to that 60%, the 60-40 split, and do that over a period of time so the schools can plan for that? I tried to ask every commissioner I could at the AMC what they did because I wanted to know, and then I did some Googling to see. And the two most common things, well, one was we just don't do it. Okay, that was one. But another was that they do a 50-50 split of the whole year cost, okay? And that actually comes out to more than what we're charging at the 60, because what we end up charging if we do the 60 is 45% of the whole year cost, not 50%. So I think the question is, are we happy with that 70 and going up with the CPI, or do we want to do a 60-40 split and do that perhaps in steps to give the schools some time to adjust to that, or do we want to do something else? And, you know, I think this will be on a board agenda where we can discuss that further, but that was what the debate was about.
Go ahead.
I also talked to a couple of commissioners at the conference. One didn't have SROs in the schools, and the other one did have SROs in the schools, but it was a joint cost between the cities and the schools. The county had nothing to do with it. So there are a lot of different ways that they do it.
And the other thing that I understood from that meeting is that the Red Wing Ed District is going to be asking us for a third SRO, so we would also be going from 2 to 3. And my inclination, my own, is to say that the 60-40 split's a pretty good deal. They're getting 40% off the cost, and if it's not of that much value when they're getting, and I understand there's money issues too, but we don't control that. Do we really want to do that? But I think doing it in steps makes the most sense. It's not that I don't support SROs. I just know there's going to be so many pressures on our budget this year that I'm just reluctant to do more than the 60-40.
Anybody else? It will be on our next board agenda. Schools need to know.
I know they do.
Soon. They
And
need
the
to know
good thing was,
soon.
it was a very cordial meeting. We spelled out that, how there'd be probably these different ideas about how to do it, and we couldn't say for sure how it would come out, and so it was good dialogue, I thought.
Add
I'll just say quickly, if we want to get to the exact cost in future years until contracts are negotiated and our insurance renewals are in, we won't know that. Obviously,
Behind.
yeah, obviously, well, all of that stuff will happen this summer, so if the envision is to have a 3-year agreement, even, this summer, we're not going to have those numbers figured out. I mean, realistically, the bulk of our contracts will get approved probably November, December timeframe. Sometimes it's even after the first of the year. So if we truly want to get to that, it's just one more obstacle that we would have to figure out, so. But there are ways of getting closer to that number.
Right, right.
But it kind of gets down to board philosophy.
Depends on the philosophy, absolutely.
Anybody else? Okay, just know that's going to be on a future budget, future meeting. Any other committee reports? Claims?
I'll move claims, we pay the bills.
Second.
And second, we pay the bills. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Moved and second, we adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you. Thanks.